Hey, hey, hey! Welcome to my cozy corner of the internet. This is Nephilim VA bringing you the 6th chapter of Inheritance, written by A is for Amy 71 on AO3. Bakugo is back, and he is as jealous as ever. But it's nice to see Izuku making friends who stand up for him. This fanfiction is for mature audiences with canon-typical violence and a trigger warning for major character death. If that isn't your style, then I recommend Shades of Green, which is written by Maybe It's Friendly on AO3. It can be found on my channel! Canon Divergence is the name of the game and indulges the what-ifs of Midoriya Izuku having a quirk. With that being said, the chapter summary is as followed. Izuku enjoys some normalcy, or so he thinks, until he encounters a man with a quirk a little like his, and things change. Now I implore you to sit back and relax, whilst I read to you. Chapter 6. The school year was a relatively good one for Izuku. Karchan continued to try to rally the other kids against him, but was largely unsuccessful in his attempts. He quieted down a bit after the school called his parents about his bullying and brash behaviour, but still insisted on calling Izuku Deku instead of his real name. Izuku didn't really mind, since the other kids were friendly, and most of them agreed that Karchan was mean. Granny Ito took Izuku on field trips every so often, but Izuku always had fun, and came back with some sort of reward for excellent behaviour. During one such outing, Izuku acquired a mysterious, almost black bruise in the crook of his arm, but he said it didn't hurt. Granny Ito told him and his father that it was probably a strange reaction to an insect bite. They trusted her. Of course. Over the summer, Izuku enjoyed trips to the beach, field trips with Granny Ito to pick berries at a farm, or to the hero store, or even a couple of overnight trips to festivals. Granny's sister ran an inn that they stayed at, and that was a lot of fun. He met Dr. Tsubasa and Shigaraki-san several times over the summer, but never remembered it afterward. He got to visit colourful shrines and temples with beautiful landscapes, and even got to meet some local heroes of small towns they visited. The only thing that wasn't really welcome was Izuku attaining a new quirk called Teflon, that made things not stick to him. His skin didn't feel any different to the touch, but it was kind of a pain because his socks would slide down really easily, and hats didn't like to stay on unless they were tied under his chin. A little research helped them learn that Granny Ito's sister had an inn next to a house where an elderly woman lived, and she had died of old age there while Izuku was nearby. He had to make adjustments to his clothes, like belts or suspenders, straps and buckles to secure anything to him. The good part was that he didn't really get dirty. Spills just seemed to roll right off of his skin. When school started again, the other kids thought his new quirk was hilarious and would purposely splatter paint or other things on him to see if they could make anything stick. In the end, they all got scolded because while Izuku's skin stayed clean, his clothing did not. I don't understand how you can have 7 quirks and all of them end up being lame. Karchan had teased him one day when no one was around. You really are a Deku. Izuku refused to get upset. He was sure that Karchan was just jealous. He felt bad that Karchan had such a wonderful quirk, but still got mad that Izuku had a handful of mediocre ones. Sorry, Karchan, he told his former friend. I don't get to choose, you know? For some reason, that only made Karchan angrier, and Izuku left him alone as much as possible. As the school year progressed and winter was in full swing, Karchan began to make almost everything into a competition, especially with Izuku. In PE, he bragged about being the fastest runner and the highest or farthest jumper. He was good at sports, but some of the other kids were better at some things. Izuku was never quite able to beat him, most of the time, but didn't lag behind by much either. That didn't stop Karchan from calling him Deku and lame and other mean things. Some of the kids that hung out with Karchan did the same, but Izuku didn't care about them. On the day that Izuku scored a goal in soccer while Karchan was playing goalie, they got into an actual fight. Karchan got so mad that Izuku had bested him that he used his quirk on the ball. It rocketed towards Izuku, hitting him in the face with a loud thonk. Izuku had been stunned as his lips split and started to swell and his nose began to bleed. Karchan had laughed at that until Izuku threw the ball back at him and hit him in the chest with it. Izuku didn't have a quirk that let him launch the ball like the other boy had, so it didn't hit him very hard. Karchan had gotten angry that Izuku had dared retaliate, even if it didn't hurt, that he used his quirk on Izuku's shoulder, burning his PE shirt. By the time the teacher pried them apart, both boys were hitting each other and shouting. Granny Ito was the one who came to talk to the teachers when they called home about it. Izuku sat in a chair beside her, looking at his shoes with tears in his eyes. Karchan sat next to his father with a scowl on his face and traces of blood under his nose, and a long row of scratches down one arm. Izuku had promptly apologized when he was told to, and he even meant it. He didn't want to fight, he never had. All he wanted was acceptance from a friend he admired. Karchan, on the other hand, refused to apologize, and made it known that he definitely wasn't sorry. No matter how his father tried to reason with him, Karchan would only say that he hoped Deku would drop dead. Granny Ito held on to Izuku's hand firmly and finally spoke up. "I will speak to Izuku about his behavior today," she said soothingly. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience and the trouble this has caused. I hope that Katsuki-kun will think about what he's done and realize that hurting people is never the answer to frustration." The principal allowed Granny Ito to take Izuku home and said Izuku would be allowed to come back the following day, since he had apologized, and reports from other students said he had not instigated the attack. Since Karchan was not repentant, he would be suspended for the rest of the school week. It was made very clear that Katsuki-kun was a problematic presence at the school, and was often reprimanded for behavior that could only be described as bullying. Izuku went home with Granny Ito, expecting to be confined to his room or punished in some way. Instead, Granny sat him down at a table and gave him a slice of cake and a cup of milk. She sat down across from him while he ate and sighed. "To be honest, Izuku, I thought that something like this might happen. Your father expected it to happen a lot sooner." Izuku stared. "Katsuki is a very angry little boy," she said gently. "He's been spoiled and it's turned him into a bit of a brat. What he did today was wrong." "I shouldn't have hit him with the ball," Izuku said, putting down his fork. "No, you shouldn't have. I understand why you did, though. Sometimes things happen that make us angry, and we end up doing something we shouldn't. Understanding that what we did wasn't okay and apologizing for it is important, but staying in control is better."
I'm sorry, Izuku said sadly. I just got really mad 'cause he laughed when I got hurt and kept on hitting me, and he used his quirk even though we're not supposed to.
I know, she said with a soft smile. But next time, I want you to try to remember that you're not like Katsuki-kun. You need to be better than him, and just walk away when he acts angry like that. Tell a teacher if he tries to hurt you, or says he's going to hurt you, okay? Izuku nodded. All right, she nodded, standing up. That's all I'll say about it then. Finish your cake and we'll get started on the chores. Kachan didn't come back to school. Izuku's dad told him that he'd gotten a call from the Bakugos and that they had decided that it would be easier for both Katsuki and Izuku if they went to separate schools, at least for a while. Since Izuku hadn't been the one causing trouble, it was only fair that he be allowed to stay at his current school and enjoy his new friends and teachers. Izuku felt tears prick his eyes at the news, and was ashamed to find that they were ones of relief instead of grief. He had honestly wanted to be Kachan's friend, and had been pushed away so many times. Seeing him again in first grade had seemed like a chance to start over, but that was impossible now. Izuku flourished once Kachan was gone. The teachers simply told the other kids that Bakugo-kun had transferred to a private school, and everyone had accepted it. Izuku excelled in reading, writing, and history, but struggled with English. Maths was okay, but he wasn't brilliant at it either. School was school. He liked it, but didn't love it. He had a group of kids he liked and played with, but didn't allow himself to really have a best friend, or go to anyone's houses when he was invited. He had learned his lesson about that from Kachan. First grade ended and Granny Ito waved goodbye to them as they started the summer break. Izuku's dad took him to Sapporo, with him on a combination business trip and vacation. His dad's company was having something called an executive retreat, and Izuku was allowed to go along and join a summer camp that featured a lot of time hiking and learning about nature. His favourite part was the huge sunflower fields and getting to play in the streams, even though they were freezing cold. He met a lot of interesting kids from a couple different countries and got to practice his English a little. From there, Izuku and his dad went to Okinawa for a couple days. His dad had a lot of business meetings, but Izuku was still able to go to the beach and earn a few more freckles on his cheeks and nose as souvenirs. After that, they had to go to Taiwan again. That wasn't as fun for Izuku, but it was better than the time before. The grief of losing his mother wasn't as fresh as before, and they were staying in a fancy hotel that even had a pool. The person that his dad found to look after him while he worked spoke Japanese and was polite and somewhat disinterested in babysitting, but not unkind. Izuku played in the pool, watched movies in the room, and learned origami from the computer while his guardian tapped away at a laptop most of the time. His dad even took some time to take him to some sightseeing spots around the city before they travelled back to Japan. He'd been away from home for almost a month. Granny Ito showed up the day they returned, and Izuku threw his arms around her middle and hugged her. She seemed surprised by the sudden affection, but pleased at the same time. She explained that she had taken time away from her family's business for the next 2 weeks, to look after Izuku full-time until school began again.
You have another job?
Izuku asked in surprise. Not officially, she said as she tackled the laundry from their trip. I help my family with their restaurants before I come to get you each day. Izuku had had no idea that Granny Ito did anything other than look after him. It used to be mine before my husband passed away, and my daughter and her husband run the place now.
Where is it? What kind of food do they have?
Izuku wanted to know, suddenly full of questions.
Can I visit? No wonder you're such a good cook.
Granny Ito had smiled a little sadly, but nodded. It's not too far away, just a 20-minute train ride. Maybe we can go for lunch one day before school starts again.
If you already have a job and stuff, why do you work here?
Izuku wanted to know. Some things happened, she said gently, and I like working here. My children are grown up, so getting to see you every day keeps me young. Now, what did you bring me from your trip? The distraction was enough to send Izuku running to find his backpack, which was filled with souvenirs. 2 days later, Granny Ito took Izuku on a field trip, where he met a nice man with a very similar quirk to his, but he couldn't really remember anything about it. He got to visit the restaurant run by Granny's daughter, and got to eat some delicious katsudon whilst he was there. Granny's daughter seemed a little afraid of Izuku, which Izuku thought was silly, but he minded his manners and tried not to fidget so much. As time went on, Izuku started 2nd grade and was glad to see his friends again. At home, he became more and more proficient in the kitchen, under Granny's watchful eye. He learned how to make some passable tamagoyaki, decent miso soup, rice, and by extension, rice balls, and even curry with a little help. He also liked to help with the chores and learned how to properly scrub the bathtub, vacuum the floors, and wash dishes. He didn't have quite the eye for detail that Granny did, or even Tanaka, but he did alright. Things settled into an easy rhythm, with few hiccups. Izuku avoided getting any new quirks for the entirety of 2nd grade, in fact. It wasn't until just before Christmas, during his 3rd grade year, that he went on a field trip with Granny Ito, that his quirk situation changed. Izuku had been pulled out of school a little early one Friday to go to a dental appointment, and after that Granny had taken him to meet a nice man with a quirk very similar to Izuku's own. He also met a boy in his very early teens with white hair and a scarred face, and a man with black mist where his head should be. The boy's name was Tomura, and to 8-year-old Izuku, he seemed practically grown up. They'd asked him a bunch of odd questions, and then, before he left, Dr. Tsubasa, whom he hadn't seen for years, arrived, and drew some of this blood. They said he had his dad's permission, and Granny Ito nodded when asked to confirm, so Izuku didn't put up a fuss. The whole thing had been very odd. The man with the quirk like Izuku's rode the train with Granny and Izuku back to Tokyo, since he had business there. He spoke to Izuku about the heroes that Izuku liked best, and Izuku went on at length about the subject. When they arrived in Tokyo, Shigaraki, that was the man's name, asked if they might accompany him to meet someone for a few minutes before they separated. Izuku and Granny Ito followed him to a normal apartment complex. It didn't look that different from the one Izuku lived in, just in a different part of the city. They went to an apartment on the 5th floor, and when the door was answered, there was a nurse there to greet them. "She's stable, but she doesn't have long. Another couple days at most," the nurse told Shigaraki, before moving to disappear into another room. Shigaraki ushered them into a room where a hospital bed was set up, and a woman about the age he remembered his own mother being when she died was sitting up, with her face turned toward the window. She was painfully thin, and her skin was greyish and waxy looking. There were straps secured across her legs and hips over the blanket. There were no flowers or room decor, just bare walls and floor and plain white blinds hanging above the windows. It smelled stale and a bit dusty in the room.
I'm not supposed to be near sick people,
Izuku said, his steps faltering. It's all right, Shigaraki told him. I already spoke to your father and he said it was perfectly fine. There's no danger here. Granny Ito took Izuku's hand, something she hadn't done in a long time. Now that he was getting older, Izuku gripped hers, feeling uneasy. This is Mariko, Shigaraki said. She was one of Dr. Tsubasa's experimental patients. Izuku didn't know what that meant, but Granny squeezed his hand even tighter as they looked at the woman. Mariko didn't move or acknowledge their presence. She seemed like a living doll, except for being so sickly. She simply wasn't a suitable candidate for our project, and her body rejected the treatments. We weren't going to keep her, but I thought she might be suitable for one more test, Shigaraki explained, as if Izuku was supposed to know what he was talking about. Shigaraki was studying Izuku intently, as if expecting something, but Izuku didn't know what. However, within moments, Mariko closed her eyes and seemed to relax back into the pillow under her head, and there was a long, tinny-sounding whine coming from a small machine on the table beside the bed. Izuku felt a shiver crawl up his spine, and his skin erupted in goosebumps. The nurse who had answered the door came into the room and shut off the machine. Then she looked at Shigaraki, who smiled and nodded. The woman turned and left the room again. Looks like Mariko isn't up for company right now, Shigaraki said, but I think the test had very interesting results.
What was the test?
Izuku asked quietly, not wanting to wake the woman in bed. Shigaraki motioned for them to leave the room, and he shut the door as all three of them filed out into the living room. This room was devoid of furniture or decor altogether. This test was for you, Izuku. The rest isn't important, but I will say that I'm quite pleased. Izuku was beyond confused, and Granny Ito looked upset. Am I understanding what just happened? The nurse said 1 or 2 days, not minutes. Granny asked Shigaraki. Correct, Shigaraki affirmed. Not only does he inherit quirks left behind, he can hasten the host's passing if they are close enough to the end. Izuku hoped he was wrong about what Shigaraki was saying. It seemed like Granny and Shigaraki were using a roundabout way of talking so that Izuku wouldn't really know what they were saying, but he wasn't stupid.
Did that lady in there just die?
He croaked, pointing at the bedroom door. Yes, Shigaraki said, sounding unconcerned. She died quite quickly and peacefully, didn't she? Izuku could feel his heart starting to race, and his breath was coming short as his stomach twisted in his gut. Granny Ito was rubbing circles on his back and telling him to take deep breaths.
Is it my fault?
Izuku demanded, on the verge of tears. No, Granny told him forcefully. Not even a little. She was very sick and there was nothing that could be done for her. Izuku felt her words soothe him. Granny was the most trustworthy person he knew. She wouldn't lie to him. It was sad that the lady had died, though. Don't worry, Izuku, Shigaraki told him, sounding pleased. This is something I have suspected for a while now. You've given me much to consider, and so I've given you something too. A new quirk from the recently departed. I want to see how your body handles something a little more powerful. It's one I think you'll eventually enjoy. You'll have to discover what it is on your own, I'm afraid. You're going to forget any of this ever happened in just a few minutes." Granny looked angry, but didn't say anything. Shigaraki-san spoke, seemingly, to the ceiling. "Kurigiri, kindly transport Izuku and Ito-san to the train station." A black void opened up in the air beside them, and both Granny and Izuku gasped. "No need to worry," Shigaraki told them both. "You're both far too valuable to me at the moment to let any harm befall you." He firmly guided them into the void, and they were shocked to see the train station directly in front of them when they passed through the darkness. The void disappeared as their feet touched the pavement, and Izuku began to cry. He didn't understand any of this, and that Shigaraki man scared him. "Let's get on the train," Granny told him. "Everything will be all right." She guided him through the station, and they got on the train. Izuku used the handkerchief Granny pressed into his hand to wipe his eyes and blow his nose. She patted his arm as they rode in silence for a few minutes, until Izuku nodded off for a moment, then woke with a start.
"Oh, sorry. I didn't think I was tired, but I just fell right asleep," he said to Granny, who was looking relieved. "Are we almost there yet? I want to see if the store has the pen I want to buy my dad for Christmas."
"It's the next stop," she told him, sounding shaky. They got off of the train in a busy shopping district and headed towards a store that Izuku was interested in. He had made a little extra money from one of his neighbours, who had taken her dog to a groomer, then hated its new look. She had paid Izuku quite a bit just to pet her dog and make its hair grow back. Now with that, plus his other savings, he could afford to buy his dad a nice Christmas gift. And then get something for Granny Ito, if he could find a way to get her something without her being there to spoil it. Izuku found the pen he'd wanted for his dad, the kind that wrote upside down or even underwater. While Granny Ito was busy looking at kimono obi for her daughter, Izuku managed to purchase a nice rail pass holder for her and hide it in the bag with his dad's pen. When they were mostly finished with their shopping, Izuku begged to go to a store that featured hero merchandise, and Granny Ito indulged him, as usual. There was a hoodie that he wanted to check the price on, but it was too high up on the wall for him to reach. Granny Ito wasn't much taller than him by this time, and she couldn't reach it either. Then, just when Izuku was up on his tiptoes trying to stretch for it, he felt his feet lift off the ground. Was all he could think to say as he rose towards the ceiling. "Izuku!" Granny Ito cried out, trying to grab him by the ankles. Luckily, Izuku had a presence of mind to grab hold of one of the clothing racks jutting from the wall. "What?" Izuku said, looking down at the people looking up at him.
"Did someone use their quirk on me?"
Everyone shook their heads as he made eye contact with a couple of them inquiringly. "I think you must have picked up something new," Granny Ito told him quietly. Izuku thought she must be right. The biggest problem with that is that he didn't know how to get down. With his other quirks, it was pretty much easy to manage. How was he supposed to manage this? "Ma'am, your grandson can't use his quirk in here like that," an employee told Granny Ito, looking at Izuku with mild annoyance. Izuku knew that public use of quirks was generally against the law, unless you couldn't help it. "He's been having trouble with his quirk," Granny told the lady. We're very sorry for the inconvenience. We'll try to get it under control. The employee looked somewhat skeptical. 8 years old was a little old to be having trouble controlling a quirk, but she shrugged. Izuku, try using the slats on the wall to walk yourself down to the floor, Granny advised him. That made sense. Izuku fit his fingers into the grooves in the wall that the display bars were slotted into, and with some effort was able to get low enough for her to reach, so she could help him touch down.
Now what?
Izuku asked as people began to go about their business now that the spectacle was over. I'm not really sure, Granny admitted, looking worried. She let him go, and he started to float upward again. She grabbed hold of him and pulled him back down. It was no real strain to do so, kind of like holding onto a large balloon. I don't want to take you outdoors until I'm sure you won't float away, she said. Or worse, get up in the air, then have it quit and you fall. Izuku didn't want that either. Is there something I can help you with? A voice asked from behind them. Izuku looked over to see a policeman standing there, looking curious but not angry.
Izuku said sheepishly. I don't know how to turn off my quirk. It's kind of new and I just keep floating up in the air.
You're a little old to just now be getting a quirk, the man said pointedly.
I know,
Izuku said nervously.
But it's true.
Granny let go of him for a moment, but Izuku stayed on the ground this time.
It stopped,
Izuku said with relief. Granny Ito still kept a firm grip on his jacket, just in case. I'm glad to hear that, the officer said. Why don't you two come with me back to the Koban for now?
You're arresting us?
Izuku asked, beginning to panic. No, of course not, the officer said with a laugh. We have information there about quirk counseling and agencies that might be able to help you learn how to control it. That could be helpful. Izuku looked to Granny to see what she thought they should do. I'm mostly concerned that his quirk will activate again while we're outside, and there won't be a ceiling to keep him from drifting away, she told the officer. That would be bad, he said, scratching his chin. How about we each take one of his hands while we walk, and if he starts to levitate at all, we can keep him grounded. That matter settled, they walked together down the road to a small building that wasn't even as big as Izuku's apartment. He sat down in a folding chair, while the officer rummaged in a filing cabinet. Granny sat stiffly beside him, gripping her purse tightly in her lap. As they waited, Izuku looked around, and suddenly he was airborne again.
Wah!
He said, feeling his butt leave the seat. Granny reached out and snagged his coat with her hand, stopping him from going any further. Izuku hung in the air, about 3 feet off the ground, feeling ridiculous as the policeman stood and walked over. I see what you mean, he said to Granny Ito. He's kind of like a human balloon. Granny nodded and Izuku sighed. This was not how he envisioned his day going. It seemed strange that it was so late already, but the sun was setting quickly, and the sky was starting to get dark. They needed to figure this out so he could go home and hide his dad's present before he got home. Let's try something, the policeman said. He took a large binder off of a shelf and held it up to Izuku. Try holding this. Izuku took the thick binder and felt himself sink toward the ground. The man handed him another, similar book, and Izuku was able to stand on his own without Granny holding on to him. That's better, the officer said with satisfaction. Now maybe you could explain why no one has figured this out before? Izuku nodded and Granny sighed. Then Izuku explained how his quirk worked and ended with,
"And this one just showed up while we were shopping."
"I'll be damned," the officer said quietly, mostly to himself.
"Everyone says that,"
Izuku says glumly. Thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate all the support you've given me. Everything is starting to become clearer, and it is just making me hate that counselor dude, who we all know is all for one at this point, more and more. I am very much emotionally invested in this story, as you can tell. All credits goes to the original creator of this fanfiction. A is for Amy71 on AO3. I would highly appreciate it if you gave this video a like and you subscribe to the channel and you hit the notification bell to be notified of when I next upload. There is no pressure to do so though. Thank you for visiting my cozy corner of the internet. Keep growing my sunflowers. Mwah!